What would the world say if Russia fired missiles into Kiev, stormed the Ukrainian capital, kidnapped President Vladimir Zelensky and his wife, and flew them to Moscow to stand trial? Most people would call it an act of war, a violation of sovereignty, a dangerous collapse of international law. But this week, something shockingly similar was announced, and it wasn't Russia, it was the United States. President Donald Trump declared that US forces had struck the Venezuelan capital of Caracas and captured sitting President Nicolas Maduro, removing him from power by force. But why did this really happen? Who is Maduro? Why did Trump target him? And why does this moment matter far beyond Venezuela? Let's break it down.
History is being made in real time.
President Nicolas Maduro captured.
Venezuelans erupted in celebration.
This is the biggest choice that I've had in like decades.
According to statements from the Trump administration, the United States carried out precision military strikes on Caracas and other strategic locations in Venezuela. Shortly after, President Trump announced that Nicolas Maduro and his wife had been captured and were being transported to face charges in the United States. The United Nations reacted with alarm, warning that unilateral military action against a sitting head of state sets a dangerous global precedent. So right away, we need to be very clear. This is still an evolving situation. But the claim alone that a superpower militarily removed a precedent can have massive implications. To understand why, we need to understand who Nicolas Maduro is.
Mi opinión firme, plena como la luna llena, irrevocable, absoluta, total, es que ustedes elijan a Nicolás Maduro como presidente de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela.
Nicolas Maduro is not a general. He is not a revolutionary fighter. He was once a bus driver and a trade union leader who rose through the ranks under Hugo Chavez. After Chavez's death in 2013, Maduro took over, and under his rule, Venezuela collapsed. The country faced hyperinflation, food shortages, mass migration, and widespread allegations of human rights abuses. Politically, Maduro became increasingly authoritarian, jailing opponents, curbing elections, and ruling through loyal institutions. But Trump's hostility towards Maduro goes beyond ideology. The US has formally accused Maduro of running what it calls a narco state. According to US prosecutors, Maduro and senior Venezuelan officials are linked to the Cartel of the Suns, an alleged drug trafficking network accused of smuggling cocaine into the United States. Trump has repeatedly referred to Maduro as a drug trafficker, a criminal, and a national security threat. The US even placed a multi-million-dollar bounty on Maduro's capture. From Washington's perspective, Maduro wasn't just a bad leader. He was a criminal who needed to be removed. So why escalate from sanctions and indictments to military action now? There are three key reasons. The first is law enforcement logic. Trump framed this not as a war, but as an arrest operation against a wanted criminal. In his narrative, Maduro isn't a legitimate leader. He's a fugitive hiding behind state power. The second reason is geopolitics. Maduro aligned closely with Russia, China, Iran, and Cuba. Removing him weakens America's adversaries in the Western Hemisphere. And the third reason is domestic politics. Trump has long positioned himself as tough on drugs, tough on crime, and tough on enemies. Capturing Maduro plays directly into that image. Strength, decisiveness, and dominance. To Trump and his supporters, the justice was delayed, but now it's delivered. But that brings us to the next question. Could this actually be a good thing for Venezuela? For millions of Venezuelans, Maduro symbolized corruption, repression, and economic ruin. If his removal leads to free elections, restored institutions, and international engagement, Venezuela could finally begin to recover. Sanctions could be lifted, investments could return, and humanitarian aid could flow freely. From this perspective, Maduro's fall isn't imperialism, it is liberation. And history shows us that many Venezuelans have desperately wanted him gone. But here's the problem. How something is done matters as much as why. Which brings us to the most dangerous part of the story. What if Moscow claimed that Ukraine's leadership was corrupt, criminal, or illegitimate, then launched missiles into Kiev, captured Zelensky and his wife, and flew them to Russia for trial? The West would call it kidnapping, state terrorism, and an act of war. So why is this acceptable when the United States does something similar? This is where Western hypocrisy becomes impossible to ignore. The US has spent decades arguing that sovereignty matters, international law matters, and borders cannot be violated at will. Yet this action bypassed the United Nations, international courts, and collective authorization. It sends a message to the world. If you're powerful enough, you don't need permission. And that is a terrifying precedent. Because tomorrow, China could use the same logic. Russia already does, and many other powers could follow. The global order doesn't collapse with one explosion. It collapses when rules become optional. And once that happens, no leader, no country, no border is truly safe. Whether Nicolas Maduro is guilty or not will be debated in courts and history books, but the method used to remove him has already changed something fundamental. This wasn't just about Venezuela, it's about who gets to decide which governments live or die. And once the door is opened, it doesn't close easily.